Hi, my name's My Chopsticks, and welcome to my very first top 10 list. Final Fantasy. Yes, we are all familiar with the world of Final Fantasy, and whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny that Final Fantasy is here to stay. But we're not here just to talk about Final Fantasy, we're here to talk about what Final Fantasy is known for. Besides its characters, its villains, its looks, its story, its music, and the world, we're here to talk about summons. Since making the first debut in Final Fantasy III in Japan and in Final Fantasy II here in America, that is to say, Final Fantasy IV, summons have been a part of Final Fantasy since, and we're here to talk about the top 10, but before we begin, just a few rules. First off, this is not about damage, this is more about how memorable they are. Second, I will be looking at these summonings as a whole, meaning you won't see the same summoning being placed on the list more than one time. With that said, let's begin. Grab a bottle of ether and change your job to a summoner. This is the top 10 Final Fantasy summons. Ramuh. Since his very first appearance in Final Fantasy III, he's made numerous appearances since then, always been shown as an old man wielding a staff and striking with the attack Judgment Bolt. With that said, he's also been replaced several times as well for some reason. For example, in Final Fantasy VIII he was replaced with... oh yeah, like I'm gonna try and pronounce that name. And in Final Fantasy X, he was replaced with a unicorn. Although to be fair, the unicorn is kinda awesome. I think Final Fantasy IX has my favorite version of him, not just for a very unique way of getting him, but also for his battle animation. But I think that's because every time I see it, I think of Power Rangers. Am I the only one that thinks that?
Magic One! Make my color
Ifrit. One of the more iconic summons, Ifrit has made numerous appearances within the games as well. With his appearance making very little to no change in each game, he's always having this ogre kinda like look to him and always having to attack Hellfire. My personal favorite choice is from Final Fantasy VIII, mostly because I can get a good laugh every time I see it. I mean, Ifrit shows up and rides a giant ball of fire and just look at him, he doesn't care. It's like,
boy do I hate Mondays.
Shiva. Perhaps the most well-known in Final Fantasy, her and her special attack Diamond Dust has made an appearance within every single Final Fantasy game, at least in the main ones. I have no personal favorite of Shiva because she basically stays the same with all the games, but if she's going to be remembered at all, it might be because of Final Fantasy XIII. Why is that? Well... Okay, so let me get this straight. So, Shiva is made out of twins that lock up
Good night, everybody.
to form a motorcycle and then let Snow ride them.
Don't look.
I literally got nothing. Next one, please. Doom Train. If you ever wonder what would happen if Thomas the Tank Engine got possessed by Pazuzu from the Exorcist movies, you've got a sick mind. For everyone else, we got Doom Train. Only seen in Final Fantasy VIII, Doom Train is a poison-based summoning that can cause 11 different status effects depending on the enemy. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I have a sick mind as well, because I would love to see Doom Train in a conversation with the Topham Hat. Doom Train, I need you to go with James to take some freight cars over to the mountain. Can I trust you to be a good engine?
Your mother sucks cocks in hell.
Okay then, off you go. What a very strange train. Anima. Out of all of the Final Fantasy summons you can have in 10, Anima is the most demonic out of all of them. First off, she gets summoned with a giant chain that drags her from hell, and just look at her. Yes, this is a her. If her looks or her special attack pain isn't enough to give you kind of a creepy feel to her, then the next part will. Underneath her is a more mirror version of her, but much more evil if there can be such a thing. It kinda makes me think of Diglett from Pokemon, that it has a bottom half that's just pure evil. It's also hard to forget Anima during her first appearance of the game when Seymour summons her during a Blitzball game that's being attacked by fiends. And you think with all of the summonings that you could get in Final Fantasy X, he chooses this one? And people can't believe he's evil. I just don't see why either. Arc. At first appearing in Final Fantasy IX as a boss that was a pain in my butt, but that's beside the point, you can later on obtain him later on in the game. They could have just made the Arc as a normal air summoning type element, just having him do a twister attack, but they went one step further. The Arc can transform into its own personal Gundam, locks onto its target, fires missiles at the enemy, then charges his cannon from Spike's ship from Cowboy Bebop to destroy the Earth. How freaking awesome is this thing? It's a Transformer!
The Transformers! Robots in disguise!
Odin. No, not that Odin. This Odin. Ever since his first debut, Odin has made an appearance in Final Fantasy one way or another with his iconic attack, Zantetsuken, known for killing enemies instantly, unless they're a boss. Like Shiva, he has made no changes within the games. He's always been seen as a demonic knight riding a horse with 6 legs, sometimes 8. I also have no personal favorite of Odin because he's hardly ever changed within the games. But if he's going to be remembered, it might be, again, because of Final Fantasy XIII. Why? Well, Odin does appear in his knight form, but later on can be transformed into a horse that lightning can ride on. Next. Bahamut. If Downstait is known as the face of the WWE, then Bahamut is easily the face of Final Fantasy. Sometimes called the Dragon King, Bahamut easily earns that title with his famous attack, Mega Flare. Always keeping the appearance of a dragon, Bahamut has made very little changes within the games except for maybe some colors. Perhaps the most well-known of Bahamut is from Final Fantasy VII, not only because there are 3 different versions of Bahamut, but then you have Bahamut Zero. Perhaps the most powerful version of Bahamut, it's also a fan favorite, and how can it not be? I mean, it's Bahamut. Did anyone else just hear that? Oh well, moving on. Eden. Only obtainable in Final Fantasy VIII, Eden is debated on whether or not it counts as a summoning or not. On one hand, Eden feels more like the Gardens. They are present within the game, and it feels more like Eden would count as a ship. On the other hand, Eden does come from a different dimension and is the most powerful GF in the game. Eden can only be obtained once you draw it from the ultimate weapon. While it is known that Eden has the longest animation, it's pretty impressive. The thing comes from a different dimension, covers the world in a seal of some type, then launches the enemy into space in a black hole, exploding, that lands back on Earth for some reason, and causes 60,000 points of damage. It's quite impressive. And the number 1 Final Fantasy summon is, say it with me, the Fat Chocobo from Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, I'm just kidding, it's Knights of the Round. Yeah, this is a very obvious choice, but it was hard not to put Knights of the Round on this list, let alone number 1. Especially when it has the attack Ultimate N. At a maximum, Knights of the Round can cause 129,987 points of damage alone. This basically kills everything it touches except for weapons and for Sephiroth in the last battle. If it's not the long animation or the damage that makes Knights of the Round more memorable, it's how you get Knights of the Round. So how do you get Knights of the Round? Well, it's hidden on a little island somewhere northwest on the map. So how do you get there? By airship, right? Wrong! No, you need a Go Chocobo. And how do you get a Go Chocobo? You first need to capture a Chocobo with a good or great status and then breed that with the same status or a mix of good or great. This will give you a blue or green Chocobo. You then breed that Chocobo with one of its parents and you get the other color Chocobo that you don't have. Incest joke. You then breed the green and the blue Chocobo and you get a black Chocobo, which is a combination of the two. Then breed the black Chocobo with a yellow Chocobo with a wonderful status and you get a Go Chocobo. You ride that thing up northwest and you get to the little round island and you get Knights of the Round. Simple, right? There is no denying it. Knights of the Round easily takes the number 1 spot for a list about Final Fantasy summons, if not the best Final Fantasy summon there is.